This is the second webinar in our 5-webinar series for the Church of England as part of their Land and Nature series. And I'm really delighted to welcome my colleague Kirsty Stevens to give this webinar. Kirsty's got loads of experience in running events, and so I'm sure she'll have lots of interesting things to share with you. And so I'm going to hand over to you now, Kirsty.
Right, can everybody hear me? I hope so. Right, I'm just going to start with this, just to set the tone, this joyous slide of my 9-year-old son having a leaf fight with a chap who was running a fungi walk for us, and you wonder who is the biggest child here. So what I'm hoping for from this session is that there'll be activities to appeal to mainly primary school children, a few for older children, but really for children of all ages. So just to engage people with wildlife and history in their churchyards. So just to briefly introduce myself, I've been working for Care for God's Acre for about 5 years now. And I originally joined as a project manager for a project called Opening the Ark, which was a joyful project, working in the Welsh Marches across 26 little rural churchyards. And the aim of that was to engage local people with the churchyard, get them involved, get them interested in the biodiversity in their churchyards, and then sort of spread that biodiversity outwards. So we work with a lot of local schools and community groups through that, a few secondary schools, mostly primary schools, and did lots of messy church activities. So that was a lot of sort of community engagement and people coming in to enjoy these spaces. I then ran a project at Kingsland Church in Herefordshire, and this was a community engagement as part of their lottery bid. And we had 150 primary school children there in just under 2 days. So complete mayhem, but all related to the curriculum. It was very active, and I'll be showing you a lot of photos of those sessions as well. And I'm currently engaged as on a project called Heritage to Inspire, which is based at a large Victorian cemetery in Shrewsbury. So we're working there with the local primary school again. And I just for fun, I was sort of adding it up before I was doing this session. So I think in total, I've done about 30 sessions working with schools and children, groups of children. So getting on for about 750 pupils. So I'm just going to be, or children. So I'm going to be sharing my experience of that today. So why churchyards and cemeteries? Why are we bothering to try and engage people with them? Well, we've all seen the statistics about children not getting enough outdoor time, being on screens too much. And yet these are free local spaces. Children can often walk to their local churchyards. There's lots of opportunities to engage children with both the nature and the sort of built environment and social history. So that's what I'm going to be covering today. There's opportunity to engage different age groups in different ways. They're also a constant resource. Children can keep going back to these, or you can run multiple sessions to sort of build on their experience. So they're a really fantastic resource. And of course, we all know about the weather. So there's always, if everything goes pear-shaped and it pours with rain, there's always the porch or the church to retreat to. And if you're really lucky, maybe a kitchen and a loo. So they're quite sort of, they're inspiring, but also sort of practical. So planning your event, sort of general guidance, obviously seek permission from your church warden or vicar. They know the site the best. They can advise you on interesting features of the site or areas to avoid or dangerous monuments. So obviously, before you even start planning, obviously seek permission to be in that space. The other thing we generally try and do is to plan events in the older areas of the site where you're less likely to find recent burials. And this is out of respect for people who may be tending a recent grave, but also in local communities, obviously, children may have relatives buried at the site, and you don't want to get that, involved with the session. So we tend to use the older areas of the site. And then before you even start, dive into our education pack for ideas. I'm going to be making reference to that as we go through the session. And pulling out some of the more interesting bits, but there's loads in there. We've got sort of 5 strands. There's precious places, what's the story, marvellous monuments, wildlife safari, and art and architecture. So there's loads to go at, loads of really great resources. If you're working with schools, it includes curriculum links, which we're looking at updating it sometime soon, but they're still valid and useful. They also, a lot of them tick the boxes for the John Muir Award, and these resources are available in English and Welsh. So if you're in Wales, again, there's another fantastic resource to look at. We can't talk about bringing children into churchyards without talking about health and safety. So a few basic things really. Before the event, make sure you have adequate support from teachers or other helpers. There's nothing like having pairs of hands on the ground. You can keep an eye on children as they wander off, or just sort of help to guide the children. So that really is key, especially if it's a large group. We've had groups of 30 school children, and you do really need sort of 4 or 5 members of staff around, sort of just to keep eyes on them and help with those sessions. Check if you're going to be entering the areas of monuments, and I think this would be you have to be very careful with this. You have to know that they are safe before you let children into those areas. Obviously, a lot of these sites are very old. A lot of the monuments are checked, but not necessarily on a regular basis. And you absolutely need to know that these monuments are safe. So that's up to you to go and check before you allow children into any areas of monuments. And obviously, you'll produce a risk assessment based on the activities you're going to run. On the day, I find the simpler the instructions are, especially with a large group of children, the more likely they are to follow them. So I say stick to the paths, don't touch or lean on the monuments, unless, of course, you're leading a project that relates to the monuments, in which case you know that those are going to be safe. Some plants are poisonous, especially the yew trees, and this is particularly relevant for younger children because yew trees do have very shiny red berries that could look quite tasty, but contain a very poisonous black seed. So really, I would avoid areas of yew trees if you were going to work with very small children. And then there's always one in every group. This is my son with a bug net on his head. This is the child you want to watch out for in these sessions. The one who's just a bit daft and isn't necessarily listening. And I tend to get the children to repeat back the 3 rules, repeat them back to me, which is probably annoying for them, but it means it's all going in. So some people might think, or you might think that churchyards could be a challenging environment for children. You're surrounded by gravestones and burials. But my experience has been that the children are generally curious and interested and quite accepting of being in these places, especially if they've been let out of school. They're just glad to be outside and doing something different. Also, a lot of them will already be familiar with churchyards through parental or school visits. So you're not bringing them into a completely unusual environment. If you do think there might be problems, we do have a section in our education pack called Activities Before You Go, which prepares children for visiting and probably preempts some of the questions they might ask. It also sets out sort of codes of conduct for behaviour and being generally respectful in these places. And again, we always talk about sort of being respectful and, behaving appropriately at the beginning of sessions. You do need to be prepared for questions and answer them as honestly as you can. One of the children at Kingsland Church, her granddad was buried in the churchyard, and she was quite keen to show me his grave and to talk about him, and we had a few minutes sort of talking, and then she was happy to join in with the session again and get on with it. You never know what's going to come up. I'll just tell you a quick story about a session we ran at Minsterley School, where we've been talking about all sorts of profound things and related to working in churchyards. And the little boy sidled up to me and he said, Miss, can I tell you something? And he was very serious. And then he told me this his 13-year-old brother went to the gym and had a 6-pack. So you really have no idea what's going to come out of the interesting discussions or, something completely daft. Just be prepared, basically. So most of the sessions that we've run have been quite short sessions, really. If you're working with schools, you generally have a double lesson, which is only an hour and a half to sort of, get your point across and teach a session. So I tend to break the session up into sort of little bits of activity. An easy thing to start with is a sort of quick icebreaker quiz, a multiple choice quiz. I tend to throw in a few comedy answers with those just to get the children on side. So, for example, you're talking about insects and you've got a couple of what is an insect, you have a couple of serious answers, and then you can say an insect is something that really knows how to bug you. And some of the kids will always choose that answer. And yeah, but it sort of gets them on side and they sort of start enjoying the session really. And then we tend to do a sort of practical, so we do a bit of learning and then a sort of practical hands-on activity that sort of relates to what we've been talking about previously. So the first half of the presentation really is going to be related to activities around nature and biodiversity. So that's exploring the nature that's in churchyards and some projects to help specific species where we can. So most of these activities can be used in conjunction with our education pack, which is again on our website, which is free to download. Loads of ideas, some of them can be done on site and some to take back to a classroom. Again, as I mentioned previously, a lot of these were sort of shorter standalone sessions, but I've tried to, in this presentation, I've tried to group them together so that if you are having an open morning or planning a longer session, you could choose from a couple of the activities to sort of fill a whole morning. So a good way to introduce the idea of nature in churchyards to children or whoever you're working with is to start looking at habitats. And obviously churches are fantastic habitats for wildlife. So looking at the church building, this is a Clun church tower where we've got swift boxes. You'll just see those in the openings there. So church towers, fantastic for bats and birds, especially swifts. If you're around in the summer, look out and listen for those. The stone monuments are home to lichen species. We've got a webinar coming up on lichens if you want to know more about those. And often the lichens are as old as the stones they grow on, so that's another great thing to look out for. Ancient trees like this yew tree at Norbury are fantastic sites for nesting and roosting birds. Dry stone walls for amphibians and reptiles. Meadows, this one here full of oxeye daisies, is fantastic for invertebrate species. And we've got a lovely section in the education pack called Habitat Hunters, where you can do a little exercise mapping different habitats. And then the little girl on the right in the picture is doing our grassland detectives exercise, where you're looking for special things and then sharing stories about what you found. So this is a really good starter to introducing wildlife in churchyards, really. Another thing you could do as a sort of introductory exercise is a little mini BioBlitz, and you really don't have to be an expert for this. Any recording you do is useful to us if you can send it to us, but just going around and seeing how many species you can identify, how many you can spot. And we ask for the 4 W's here: what you saw, where you saw it, when, and who saw it. And then if you could send those records to us, that would be endlessly helpful. So moving on to sort of other activities, one of the most popular things we do is a bug hunt. And again, you don't have to be an expert to run a good bug hunt. We've got loads of resources online, including our mini beast identification key here, and some top tips for mini beast hunting. So check those out. And I've tried to put some prices to some of these activities. So good bug hunt, lots of different ways to look for bugs. I mean, with adult supervision, you can just roll over stones and logs and see what's underneath and look for bugs that way. But I would say bug pots are really, really useful addition to a bug hunt. These are about £17.99 for 10 of them. So you could run quite a good bug hunt with 10. But these allow you to capture what you've found and have a good look at them. They've got magnifying glass in the top, so you can actually start to you can share them and people can get a good look at them. It's a beautiful cockchafer beetle that we found at one of the sites we're working on recently. Then sweep nets are also fantastic, and children love using these, especially if you've got long grass on site. You run around with a sweep net, sweep it through the long grass, and basically see what's in the bottom of the net. So beginners' sweep nets are about £25, and obviously you can share them between children. Or BBC Bite Size has really good instructions for making your own sweep net with a wire coat hanger and a sheet, a pillowcase, sorry. So you could make one for free if you're feeling enterprising. You could do that. White sheet is always a useful thing to have on a bug hunt. Place it underneath a big tree or a bush or a hedgerow, and just give it a gentle shake and see what drops out. And then you get in there with the bug pots and try and catch things. That's another good way to sort of find out what's on site. And finally, a sort of metal sieve or a garden riddle. You can fill that full of, leaf litter or something like that, and then just shake it over your sheet and again, see what runs out of it. So that's a really easy way to run a sort of bug hunt, and then, as I say, refer back to our charts to see what you've discovered and just enjoy your findings. Everybody's familiar with bug hotels, but this was a site we worked on at Minsterley where they didn't really have room for a bug hotel. And also some of the children were keen to take things home with them. So we invented these bug B&Bs, which are using terracotta plant pots. And this is a nice activity where you literally sort of loop some wire through the opening of the plant pot and through the hole at the bottom. And then we provided some forage materials, but the children went around the churchyard, gathered their own forage materials, and then packed them into these into the plant pots to make these we called them bug B&Bs. And some of these were hung in the churchyard. Some of them they took back to hang in their forest school area. So this is a nice activity. If you've got an hour and a half, you can do this, including the foraging, and you can see that some of them decorated their pots as well if they had a bit of extra time at the end. So this is quite another quite affordable activity to do with children. This is another favourite with children, again following on from a bug hunt, is using air-dried modelling clay and forage materials for children to make their own bugs. And I'm not going to apologise in this presentation for the extensive use of air-dried clay, because it's just such a fun activity. It's not too messy. Children really engage with making something outdoors. So if you buy a bag and do this activity, you'll find there are quite a few other follow-on activities that you can use it for as well. But children are sort of endlessly creative. I mean, if you can provide a few books, or the Field Studies Council do some fantastic fold-out charts with pictures of grasshoppers and ladybirds and spiders, just for reference, or you can use whatever you've caught on the bug hunt for reference. It really inspires creativity. And I particularly like the bug on the bottom right, centipede or millipede or whatever he is, with his bulging berry eyes and his multiple stick legs. So this is a really fun activity to do with kids. So moving on to more making activities. Obviously, there are hundreds of designs for different bird boxes out there, but this one caught my eye because it can be done without the use of any special tools, and it can easily be done on site. And with supervision, these can be made by quite young children. We've done these with primary school children. It's a natural history museum design. And what you basically do is you take a terracotta plant pot, again, obviously a frost-free one so it doesn't break, and then you file out the hole to make it big enough for different bird species. I will say at this stage that the noise is horrendous. So if you've got any children who are sensitive to noise, this may not be the activity for them, but they do quite enjoy going at it. You file out different hole sizes. 25mm holes suits blue tits, 28 for great tits and tree sparrows. And I can confidently say that nobody has ever filed one out to 32mm to fit nuthatchers and house sparrows. So, and then you secure it to a board. Again, I always bring pencils to decorate the boxes, and this is useful for if some children are still working on their construction and others have finished. But also they really enjoyed personalising them, so they can identify their own box when it's hung up on site. And a lot of them wrote secret messages for the birds that were sort of underneath the plant pot, so only the birds would ever see them. And they kind of enjoyed that as an activity as well. And I can say that these plant pots do work. We've got some that my own children made that are erected on our house, and they're always full of blue tits every year. So, you know, it's a practical design as well. We've made quite a lot of bird feeders. Again, this is an easy win, sort of following on from doing a bird activity perhaps. And obviously follow the RSPB guidance about feeding birds, because they're not recommending that we feed right through the summer. So this would be a good autumn activity. The one on the left is a very easy recycled plastic bottle with a couple of wooden spoons for birds to perch on and eat the seed. We also did apple feeders, so basically an apple with 2 sticks and then pushing sunflowers into those, and they can be hung up in trees around the site. And then we did some bird feeders with threading different food sources onto a piece of wire and hanging those up. So raisins, natural popcorn, so obviously unflavoured and unsugared, and potatoes, cooked potatoes work well for this one. Obviously be careful if there are likely to be dogs on site with the raisins. We use hand lenses quite a lot in activities we do. Compared with some of the other activities I've talked about, they are relatively expensive. They're about £13 each. But they do come in useful for a lot of different sessions, adult sessions as well. They're very useful for fungi sessions, geology sessions, or nibble nut hunts, that kind of thing. But again, children love these, and even a few that could be shared around are a really valuable resource. They immediately give you a sort of close-up insects view of the world. So apart from the compound eyes, obviously, but they sort of bring nature into sharp focus and really make you notice details that you wouldn't do otherwise. So they're a lot of fun for working with children. And we put together this little exercise that we go and do. We call it hand lens safari. So the children go and gather different materials, draw the item as it is, and then draw what they can see through the lens. So, and then there's a sort of imaginative aspect to it. So they'll say, oh, it's bark, it looks like dinosaur skin, or the middle of the daisy looks like fractal patterns, or whatever it is. So if your budget runs to this, I think these are a very engaging activity that can be used for multiple of uses. This is a project we did at a school in Clumbury, and we did sort of multiple sessions at this site, so we did keep going back. Yeah. Sorry about the noises behind me. We do have quite a lot on our website in the education pack about hedgehogs, so check those out before you start. But this was a very simple footprint trap made out of a plastic box that I had at home. Obviously, you cut an opening in each end, and you mix up a special kind of paint which isn't going to be damaging to the hedgehog should it enter the footprint trap. So it's you need some carbon powder for that, which you mix with some olive oil, and you put that at the entrance to the traps, and along with a piece of paper inside and some cat food, and then leave it alone. And we put this out we were working in the school grounds for this one. But we delighted a week later when we came back and found actual hedgehog footprints in the trap. So this was quite an entertaining one. The children went on to use this again in different locations. And following on from that, we decided we would build a hedgehog house. There were different versions of this, including just piling up twigs and things. And check out our hedgehog section of the education pack. But we asked our local builders merchants if they could donate some material, and constructed a hedgehog house with a very sturdy sheet of ply and some bricks, and then the children camouflaged it and they made a little sign about it. So again, it's the sort of thing that you could do in a quiet corner of the churchyard. That would be quite engaging for children. This is another activity that we've run in churchyards. You rarely see a dormouse because they're nocturnal and they hibernate for half the year. So the best way to find out if they're present on a site is to search for nibbled nuts. If you're not sure whether you have dormouse locally, you can search the National Biodiversity Network Atlas, and it will show you whether species are present anywhere near where you live. So basically this is an autumn activity, going out, looking under hazel bushes in the churchyard or around the churchyard. And you're looking for nibbled nuts of any kind of nibbled nuts, nibbled or split nuts. And this is another activity that you could use with a hand lens. So you're looking at the sort of quality of the tooth marks around the opening of the nut. And so you can either bring those back to the church and look at them with a magnifying glass, or as I say, you can look at them on site. Dormice leave this very distinctive sort of spiral-shaped tooth marks around the opening of a nut. So that's very exciting if you find that. But it's also nice just to find other species. If you look, there's a little guide here. So mice are messy, so they leave a lot of tooth marks around the rim of a nut, which is called chatter. And voles leave chisel-like tooth marks on the nut, but no chatter on the surface. So you can sort of do a sort of detective work on what you might have, which species you might have living locally. Another project you can do with children is putting down reptile mats. Obviously, you need to ask permission before this happens, but these are great for a churchyard where you're doing repeat visits because you can go back and monitor them. So these are slow worms, obviously. They are legless lizards, and they need to warm up before they can go out hunting for the day. So, but they don't bask out in the open, so they need something undercover that warms up nicely. So these reptile mats are perfect for slow worms. The material we'd recommend using for these is this Onduline roofing sheets. And these can often be given to you by local builders' yards or DIY stores if you can ask for some offcuts of these. And what you're looking to do is place them around the churchyard next to some long vegetation or next to a wall in a sunny spot, and then just leave them there for a few weeks and allow whatever creatures are going to in the churchyard to find them. Now, you might be lucky enough to have slow worms in your churchyard, but we've found all sorts of things under these mats. Lots of nibbled nuts, so I think voles are under those quite a lot. Ants' nests, and at this particular churchyard, a rather large grass snake was found underneath one of those, basking in the morning time. Try and recall what you see underneath these. It's a good idea to have more than one person around so that when you do turn the mat, somebody can take a quick photograph to record what's under there, because slow worms, despite their name, are actually very fast. And if you do start finding slow worms on site, we have, please report them to us, but we've got lots of slow worm activities in our education pack as well. So now there's a few sort of wildflower activities. We've done quite a lot of wildflower spotter guides and things like that. I always try and include something that's basically don't include plants that are very rare. What you want is for children to actually find the plants that are on your spotter guide. So you can either put together your own guide or download some of ours. Try and include something that's memorable for children. So one of the ones that I really like is plantain, because you can play a game that's, nobody will mind if you pick a couple of plantain heads, and you can play a game that's like conkers, so you can try and knock each other's heads off. And these are the kind of things that children will remember. Bird's foot trefoil is good because the dried seeds look like tiny bird claws or bird's feet. Fox and cubs is another great one because it's so distinctive, bright orange flower, and so again it's a good one to really remember. And then I particularly like pineapple mayweed as well, because when you crush the flowers it smells of pineapple. So things that will sort of engage children and make them remember what you're talking about are great. Another clay activity, I'm afraid. This one is making seed bombs. Loads of different recipes online for this, but we tend to use clay and a bit. If you have natural clay on site, you can use that, or air dried clay. A bit of soil, and make sure that the seed you're using is native wildflower seed, from either gathered from the churchyard if you can, maybe the autumn before, or sourced from a really reputable supplier. So we obviously sell seed from our website, which would be suitable for using in churchyards. When you're Obviously, don't sow these in the more species-rich areas of the churchyard. There's no need for that. But children can take these home and sow them at home or sow them in their school grounds or whatever. And I often bring things like letter stamps so they can personalise them, but obviously that's not strictly necessary. This is another really easy win that children and adults like. The only problem with this is you do need a sunny day. But this is a lovely activity just with some very simple plants, a couple of jam jars, and you can do a lovely drawing activity, just drawing around the shadows. You can then colour the plants in, or you can colour the empty spaces around the plants in. And it's a really simple way to sort of engage people with wildflowers. Another one is cyanotype prints. We've used this quite a lot. And you buy specific cyanotype paper, also called sunprint paper, and lay different plant species over the top of the paper. And the UV light sort of oxidizes the cyanotype, and you get left with these beautiful prints. You just need to fix them in a bit of water. These were done on site at Plum Churchyard, and yeah, you get some beautiful results from these. They're quite simple to do. And another one, again with air dried clay, I'm afraid, but again, just pressing wild plants into the clay to develop different textures and patterns and record them against letter stamps if you want to, so that you can record which species they are. You combine this with some textures taken from the monuments. Again, if you know they're safe, you can take some letter stamps and things like that. So another sort of creative activity that you can do in a churchyard very easily with children. And together, I think all of those last three activities could work together to make a really beautiful display in the church, sort of showcasing what wild species you have in your churchyard. So I hope that's given you some ideas for activities to engage children with wildlife and nature. But obviously churchyards are also fantastic for history sessions. They really are great places to enable children to explore a tangible link to the past. So not just the church and individual monuments, but also the sort of the wider social history of the village and the community can be explored through these places. And children can investigate the headstones and the monuments and reveal sort of all sorts of stories about the people who are buried there. So there's a lot to be discovered. And again, delve into our education pack, which has a lot of stuff relating to this. It's quite simple to put together a symbol spotter guide based on the more common symbols that you find in your churchyard. These are all from the cemetery I'm working with currently in Shrewsbury. And we can talk about why there were carvings on the monuments, possibly because people were less literate when these monuments, you know, in Victorian times, the poor people in society wouldn't have had access to reading material. But they also say something about the person who's commemorated. So there's a lot of interesting discussions to be had there. So it's quite easy to put together a simple symbol spotter guide with some very basic meanings, and just give those to children to go and, you know, go off in pairs and try and find as many as you can of each different symbol. We put together this little activity for based around the symbols. So a drawing activity first of all. The symbol I've noticed is this one, and why they've chosen it. And then maybe they could follow that on with a symbol that could be used to represent me is, and I've chosen this because, so they get to sort of, it's an imaginative activity that they can use to follow on from their observations on site. This is a session we did at Kingsland School based on, again, the sort of symbols on the gravestones. We walked around the church as well and looked at the gargoyles and grotesques on the church building, the angels and on the monuments. And then we did a drawing activity with the pupils, following on from which we had permission to actually create these on the church wall. And the children loved this. They put a lot of effort into the detail. If you look at the one with the hands in the middle at the top, this symbolises usually a sort of husband and wife. And you can see they put a lot of detail into the hands, the fingers clasped around each other, and the lace on one of the cuffs. So we've got a huge amount of detail and sort of imagination from these. the one underneath, there were some amazing tombs with sort of huge lion's feet, and these were really good copies of the shapes of the tombs. So this was another thing to sort of engage children with sort of learning about the carvings and the obviously graveyards and churchyards are full of stories, and if you have anybody who can go away and is good at researching those, this is another activity that can really engage children fantastically well. We used Find My Past, which is available free at lots of libraries, and just pulled together some stories from the cemetery to share with the children. And we ran it like a sort of treasure hunt. So they had a map that they had to follow and discover these stories. And we included all sorts of things. There were people who rescued people from drowning in the River Severn. There was a music hall artist. One of the first female doctors is buried at the site. And then a 13-year-old boy who died on a naval training ship. So it stimulated a lot of discussion, and the pupils really enjoyed this session. It's another really nice one to do if you can, if you've got somebody who's willing to do that research. And how are we doing for time? This is one of the activities on our action pack, being a history detective. What's the story? Are there any clues? So looking at some of the monuments, are there any clues to the person's job or the kind of life they led? Did they have a family? Did women live longer than men? What's the average age of people in a given decade? So all sorts of sort of information you can pull out of that observation of gravestones. We're nearly there. This is nearly the end. We recently ran a geology session at the request of a local school. And obviously, I'm not a geologist, but we had really interesting discussions about why people might have used local stone rather than imported stone. When did people start importing stone? Obviously, the coming of the railways helped that, and stones like marble and granite is much more prestigious and carves much more easily. We looked at Commonwealth war graves and why they were always made of Portland stone. And again, you can see children using hand lenses in the top left photo to look at that stone close up. And they were looking for, obviously it's a limestone, so they were looking for little oolites and sea creatures in the stonework. So there's lots of, even if you're not an expert, there's lots of discussions you can have about this. And another exercise we did was covering up the dates with a piece of cloth tied around the monuments, and the children had to sort of guess from the design and the stonework used what age the stones were. So maybe not a whole session, but a quick quiz. It's another sort of aspect of graveyards that is interesting for children. Sometimes you just need a quick and easy win, something to occupy them for 10 minutes. So work in pairs, find the oldest grave, find the oldest person buried here. Sometimes mostly ages are on the gravestones, but sometimes you have to work it out from the dates. Find someone with the same initials as you. We never say the same name because obviously that could be emotive but it could involve relatives, but same initials as you. A scavenger hunt is always a good one to occupy children for a short amount of time. You know, find something red, find a snail shell, find the word beloved or a particular date. And then a big collaborative nature drawing is one that can work with a lot of these sessions where you just roll out a large piece of lining paper and provide some drawing and painting materials or rubbing materials and some natural objects as inspiration, and just let people all do a sort of large collaborative drawing during the day and all join in with that. I haven't said much about older children and teenagers because most of my projects have been with primary schools, and by the time you get to secondary school, it's much more curriculum focused and there's not as much flexibility to come out on site. But a few suggestions are the iNaturalist app. Harriet and Hannah, my colleagues, did a fantastic webinar on how to use that. So I know a lot of us wince at the thought of downloading an app, but this is firmly teenage and young people territory. And, you know, this is a fantastic to learn about nature and to provide information that will be useful in terms of building that picture of what nature is in our churchyards. Again, the Merlin app, I'm sure a lot of you have come across that, but finding out about bird song What that does is allow you to record birdsong or listen to birdsong and tell you which species are singing. So that's another nice one to use with older children. We have a fantastic project at the moment, Our Digital Ancestors, which relates to recording inscriptions on the monuments. So a lot of these monuments are very old and the inscriptions are getting worn away. So we've got a lot of resources online if older children and teenagers might be interested in getting involved with a recording project. That could be an interesting way of getting them involved. And then again, researching the stories behind some of the stones, especially in small local churchyards, either going and researching the actual people themselves, or just a project looking at the dates, their birth and death dates. So, so-and-so was born in the reign of Queen Victoria. Inventions during his lifetime include, he survived the First World War and died at the height of the Great Depression in 1930. So it sort of builds a picture of what was going on at that time. And without very in-depth research. So I hope that's given you some ideas of what we've been doing and maybe some ideas that you can use yourselves. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kirsty. I was just going to say, do you want to just go on to the final slide? Because there you can see the list of the other webinars in this series. I'm sure everyone would join me in saying that was absolutely fascinating and lovely to see so many children doing so many creative things and having such a good time, and so many different aspects that one can draw out of this, often really small place. We now have time for questions. So if you want to stop sharing now, I know there have been a few questions come through. So let's just have a look. And please, if you have any questions, now is the time to type them in. The first question that I spotted was from Fiona, who asked what NHBS stands for. I'm pretty sure it's Natural History Book Service, though I don't think anybody ever says that. But it really is a fantastic shop, basically, an online shop of all things to do with spotting wildlife. We've got one, hug the tree and see how many children needed to measure the girth of a tree. Yes, lovely. We've also done that one. And if you've got a really large tree, it's quite amazing how many there are, and it really focuses the mind of the children on how big they are.
Yeah, it's in our tremendous trees, isn't it? And it's also talks about assessing the height of a tree and that kind of thing as well. So
yes, that's another fun one, is measuring the height of a tree with a stick, isn't it? David asks where we can find the education pack. It is on our website, David, but also Kirsty's going to put together a little sort of pack of the resources that have been mentioned in this talk. And I know my colleague Anna is going to share the recording with you probably later today or very soon after, and include, I think, links to that information. So you will be sent all of that. Katrina asks, do we need to get special insurance to run activities with children's groups? Any thoughts on that, Kirsty?
We haven't, but we've mostly been doing it through schools who are insured themselves.
Also, these are public sites. I mean, if you're a churchyard manager, you'll know that you need insurance to have a wedding, to have a funeral. You're already well insured for people being on your property, if you will. You don't need specific for children's groups now. Got lots of people saying thank you. Anna's put the link to the education pack up. Thank you for that. Emma asks, interested to hear if schools fund this, you volunteer, or is there a funding body supporting you? Say anything about that, Kirsty?
Well, we've always run it as part of our projects, so we've had the funding in place already. I don't know about any external funding. Do you have it?
No. I mean, one thing to say is that it's very common that a school can walk to their local churchyard or cemetery or chapel yard. So they may be able to find some funding. But we've never charged schools for this because, as Kirsty says, we'll always link it onto a project, so we will have funding. But schools usually ask parents for funding in order usually to pay for the bus. And this would be an activity where you hopefully don't need a bus. So it might be that if a little bit of funds were needed, perhaps for some supplies or something like that, the school would be able to supply them. Leslie asked, do you have to be DBS cleared in order to run activities?
We do have DBS checks in place, but I think if you're not solely in charge of the children, if you're working again sort of through a school or with teachers, then I don't think that's a prerequisite for running these sessions.
No, I think that's quite right. So long as you're not on your own with the children or with an individual child, you're in an open space, and you need to make sure that either teachers or carers or or parents are with you. Then you're all right. So it isn't that difficult to get checked. So it could be a useful thing if you're going to do a lot of things like this. Yeah. Geraldine tells us, thank you, Kirsty, fantastic presentation. I'm sure we'll all echo that. Our 2 primary schools are already actively involved with our graveyard initiatives. Your ideas are inspiration. Looking forward to seeing your resource pack. Great, thank you. And more thanks and good ideas. Yeah, I think that might be it for questions. And very, very helpful to have a bit of chat from the people here from Scotland, where obviously there's a slightly different system. I'm guessing the PVG is equivalent to a DBS. But thank you for that, because we're always really interested and delighted to have people joining us from Scotland and Northern Ireland. But we haven't done much in either of those 2 nations, so it's really good to have your input. Reverend Anson Marsh mentions the watch group. I also remember the watch group. It is indeed it was a Wildlife Trust sort of youth group. I must say I don't know whether it's still going. I haven't heard about it for a long time, but yes, that was an excellent thing. And I think many people went through the watch group system and then followed it as either a lifelong interest or even a profession. So yes, it is amazing how you can influence a child. You just don't know who's picking up what, do you? But I'm sure your local wildlife trust group might be a good place to start if you're wanting local support. So I'm not seeing any more questions coming through. So I think we're more or less there. So yeah, unless there's any last questions. Oh my goodness, thank you, Katrina. So the watch groups are still going. Got a link there for the watch group. So I do apologise. They clearly are still going, and that would be a really good place to start if you're wanting to access experts. It might help you. I think that's it for questions. So I'll just once again like to thank Kirsty very much. Somebody's asked for a copy of the slides. What we might do is do a PDF of them and attach that along with the other resources and the recording. I think that would be okay. Anna, please correct me if I'm wrong about that. But yeah, yes, please do a PDF. Okay, I think that's about it. And so thank you so much all for coming. It's really nice to have people there when we're actually delivering webinars because of exactly this, because of all this chat. So thank you for your comments. And look at all those hands and claps. I love these. I love all this feedback because it's quite strange doing a Zoom or a Teams chat. You get no feedback from the audience, so it's very nice to see. And we hope to see you later in the week. I think we have butterflies tomorrow, so please do register if you haven't already. And hope to see many of you tomorrow. Okay, I think that's us done. Thank you.